My next guest is Jayne Rossworn. She's a clinical counselor with a fascinating background. She was an elite athlete. She was a solicitor, worked in-house, freelance, in private practice. She worked in the Career Services Center at Allard Law School and TRU. And now she has her master's in counseling, and she is counseling lawyers and elite athletes high performers in all things related to mindset of the high performer, setbacks, building confidence. She also works on a whole host of other typical counseling related matters that somebody would seek counseling for. And she's joining us to talk more specifically about how to recover from setbacks. She's got a four-step framework that she's going to take us through. And she has a lot of nuggets and a lot of tools. And I think that everyone should see this podcast and listen to this podcast in particular to prepare yourself for, when a setback might occur, that you've got some tools and a framework that's going to help you move through it, that it is not necessarily life-changing, that it's going to pass. And she offers some words of wisdom that I think are going to be really helpful. So I'm excited she's here to join us, and I look forward to sharing her wisdom with you. Enjoy. Welcome to the Lawyer Launcher Podcast. Hello, friends. I'm your host, Susan Van Dyke. If you're a law student or a new lawyer eager to launch a successful career, you're in the right place. Drawing on more than 25 years of experience, I'll demystify the business of law and help you understand just what it takes to succeed. We'll empower you, help build confidence, and reduce anxiety. Our experts will share tips and advice, and I can't wait for you to hear from them. Now, let's dive in. Jayne, one of the things that I was so excited about talking to you about and bringing you onto the podcast, and thank you again for coming and sharing your wisdom with students, was this unique intersection that you have of elite sports. I think you were a mountain biker at a very high, significant level, elite sports, law, because you were a practicing solicitor, in-house, freelance, and in private practice. And then you were in career services in law schools, Allard and TRU. And then you went off and did your master's, overachiever, master's in counseling. So you are so unique with all of these different pieces that you bring. And you've spoken in your career services career. I know you said you've spoken to hundreds of students. So you really understand the student mindset. So how did that all come together?
Well, first of all, Susan, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I'm so honored to be here.
Of course.
Like you said, I've worked with hundreds of law students, so I love any opportunity to be able to connect with law students again, and what you're doing through Lawyer Launcher is just so inspiring. So thank you. To answer your question, it's been a long and winding road in a lot of ways. For sure. But, I think sort of when I think about, my career and kind of the way it's gone and how it relates specifically to what we're talking about today, like sort of rebuilding confidence after setbacks. And I think about so much of my path that has all kind of come together, like you say, all these things that I kind of thought were separate and have all kind of come together really nicely. So I definitely have had a pretty non-conventional career, both as a lawyer and as an athlete. And so I kind of did things backwards, right? Like most athletes start their elite career young, and then they're either like doing their undergrad simultaneously or they go back to school after. I got a law degree and then became an elite athlete. So it was kind of like a different way of doing things. But I was able to sort of get to a place in my legal career where, I could transition into a freelance type role that gave me the flexibility to be able to pursue this opportunity that had come up for me with where I was at in my place in life. And so that was really meaningful to me to be able to do that. At the same time, there was a lot of challenges I was dealing with in terms of, being a high-performing athlete, balancing a legal career with that. And so I started seeing a clinical counselor at the time who specialized in working with athletes and other high-performing individuals. And the tools that he gave me were so helpful, and I was so inspired. And during that period too, I ended up getting injured, which set me back quite a bit in my training right before like a really important race that I had. And I remember feeling just so devastated around that whole experience. And he helped walk me through, and he helped me really focus on the process of who I wanted to be. And I think through those tools, I was able to kind of rebuild the confidence, go to that race, and ended up actually like winning this Canada Cup race,
Wow.
which like took me by surprise. But
Yeah.
so all that whole experience really inspired me to want to get into counseling. And
So,
so when the position came up at TRU Faculty of Law to cover a mat leave doing career counseling there, I was like, oh, amazing. What a cool opportunity to use my law background and pursue this love of counseling. So I was able to move into that, and then of course I ended up taking a position at Allard Law as well. So I was able to spend a few years, yeah, working with many law students and helping them navigate their careers, which was such an awesome experience. And then, yeah, which then led me to pursuing my master's in counseling. So I know it's a bit of a long-winded explanation, but yeah, that's kind of how it all came about.
no, it's so interesting. It's like you were meant to be in this space at this time, and you've brought all these different experiences. And what's kind of interesting is that you thought you were having a setback or a potential setback in sport,
Mhm.
and yet it was that experience of going to a counselor and maybe having a bit of a wow moment, like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I needed this, and how helpful it
Yeah.
was, and the tools, and that activated perhaps something in you, right? And then you pursued that in pulling all the pieces together. So I'm fascinated. So if you take us back to your experience in the career services, either in TRU or Allard, which you
Mhm.
said you'd spoken to hundreds of students, is there anything in particular that stops a student from coming and looking for help? Because I think that is probably one of the first steps, right? If somebody doesn't ask for help, then they are suffering on their own. They're spiraling potentially, and they're not reaching for help, because really it starts with asking for help, right?
Yeah,
So can you talk to us a little
absolutely.
bit about what might, and there may be a lot of different things. There's maybe not any one thing that's interferes with somebody asking for help, but did you see any patterns there or anything that's helpful?
Hmm. Hmm. Totally. And yeah, like you say, it could be really individual. And so yeah, so we're talking more about sort of patterns that I've seen. And I love this question because I mean, what, I might end up being a bit of a broken record in this conversation, but um, the ability to reach out for support, to seek social support, and to foster that is such an important part of your career progression and your mental wellness, right? But the one thing, to go back to the question, the one thing I really did notice, and I still notice now with high performers in general, like I work with athletes as well in my counseling practice, but yeah, lawyers, athletes, a lot of high performers, law students fall into this category too. Reaching out for help can feel kind of scary, right? It feels a bit vulnerable. It may be perceived as a sign of weakness sometimes. A lot of the time we feel like, oh, I can just tough this out. I can do this myself. I can figure out, how to get a job, whatever. I don't have to have other people to help. And I do see some of that perception changing. But I
Mhm.
think there's a lot, some
Mhm.
of those barriers around the stigma of reaching out for help are coming down, which is great to see.
It is great. You just reminded me, I've worked with a few lawyers in very senior, very, very senior lawyers in the last sort of, I don't know, 5 to 10 years of their career. And as I've come to know them, I remember saying to a couple of them, you are such a good communicator and you're such a
Mm.
good leader. And it's quite unique in the way in which you are talking about your own strengths and challenges. Where does that come from? And very often I've seen a bit of a pattern lately, and it's just coincidental, I'm sure, that they have a spouse who's a counselor or somebody close to them who's actually a counselor. So they have those resources within reach, and they've used their
Interesting.
skills and used, I'm sure, their learnings in their profession, and it shows. I can usually spot someone who's, well, not always, but often there's a thread there where somebody's really open and vulnerable. They're excellent communicators. They
Hmm.
have tools that they work through, and it's such a delight. And when you
Interesting.
go back to the comment you made about the high performers, it may very well be those students who aced high school, aced their undergrad, they're
Mhm.
rocketing along, they're celebrated for their success, they're winning awards or,
Celebrating. Yeah.
all of that. And then they get to law school and it's different. Maybe it's tougher. Maybe it's, not what they expected, and they haven't
Hmm.
yet had to ask for help. Would that be a common
Oh,
scenario?
absolutely. Because if
Yeah.
you've got to the point where you're at law school, yeah, you've been performing really well to this
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, it can even just being in the law school environment um, can be a big change,
Right.
and it can, bring up all sorts of setbacks in itself, right? And it's interesting too, you say that because a lot of the time, in counseling, when we're helping people work through something, a lot of the time, a common thing we might ask is like, well, what's a similar experience in the past, and how have you been able to overcome that challenge in the past? When have you dealt with a setback before? And I notice a lot of people early in their career, they can't think of a time, right? They can't think of a really significant setback they've had to overcome. So sometimes, like, yeah, it's a really new experience, and so setbacks can hit especially hard
Right.
for law students and,
Yes.
and articling students and new lawyers, right? So.
And maybe because it's new, because they've been a high performer, they think something, I shouldn't be asking for help. There's something wrong. There's something I got to muscle through. I've got to just
Hmm.
dig in and find my grit and just carry on. But
Yeah.
actually, what you're saying is the very opposite. Part of being disciplined is using resources around you. And I know we're going to
Yeah.
talk during this interview about a lot of the different resources that are available to students, including yourself, of course. Um, but that would be new. And I think what we're trying to do in this podcast, and certainly in this session with you, is to make sure students are alive to the idea that let me finish my thought. When they do encounter a setback, that they don't hesitate, that they pivot right away and they look for the help that they need. And if it's not
Hmm.
quite the right counselor, to keep seeking who is the right person for them. But I did want to say, I think it's fair to say, and I would love your comments on this too, Jayne. In somebody's career, there must be a statistic somewhere that most people have had a major setback. Most people have had,
Hmm.
I know lawyers who have had significant, um, how would I express this, issues in trial, literally in trial,
Hmm.
horrific experiences in trial.
Hmm.
And it's been
Hmm.
very difficult for them to get back. I know people like that. I know people who, in the workplace have had significant setbacks, whether they've been terminated or where they've had a
Hmm.
traumatizing experience. I know I have in my workplaces. I've had
Oh
lots
yeah.
of different variety various levels of trauma in my workplaces
Hmm.
because it's tough.
Hmm.
Law is a tough
Yes.
workplace. It's the very reason why I'm having these conversations. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also don't know if I have any stats on that as well, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'd be willing to bet that anybody who is successful in their career has dealt with setbacks.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. There's actually a really good quote by Michael Jordan that I feel really encapsulates this well, where he sort of lists all his failures, right? All the missed
Ah,
shots,
yes.
all the
Yes.
times he was expected to take the game-winning shot and missed it, all the games he lost, all of this. And he talks about how he failed over and over and over again. And that is why he succeeded.
Yes, yes, 100%. And that
Yeah.
we should almost, and I hate to use the term invite failure, but I think we should continue to challenge ourselves and find those edges. And when we do find the
Hmm.
edges and we go beyond the edges and we experience a failure in quotation marks, that it is an opportunity for growth and learning. And I know that sounds like a greeting card, but I know personally it's so true that there's so much
Absolutely.
learning in failure. And I would just really want everyone to take risks and take some, some reasonable challenges and risks in their careers so that they continue to grow. And I think that's where we start to see setbacks.
Yeah, exactly. Because, yeah, the more risks that we take, the more resiliency we build.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So Jane, how do you define the difference between a setback and a disappointment though?
Yeah, good question.
Those could be different, right?
Yeah, yeah. So a disappointment, yeah, we'll deal with them regularly. Maybe, yeah, you get a grade on a law school exam you're just not super stoked about. Um, Maybe, yeah, your friend had to cancel on you. It's like, maybe you get some negative feedback from someone who's kind of grumpy that day, right? These things, yeah, we deal with these disappointments pretty often. And they're usually the kind of thing that we can sort of integrate into how we see the world already. Like, okay, yeah, everyone gets bad grades every now and then, right? It doesn't affect sort of my trajectory as
Right.
a law student. But a setback is really more about, that trajectory that we see for our lives. And a setback sort of stalls or reverses some of the progress that you make on that. And I think, in law, we might feel setbacks particularly strongly because, we sort of consider a series of steps that we're supposed to take in this career, right? You get your undergrad, you go to law school, you get good grades, you do OCIs if you choose to do that. You go through the formal recruitment process, you article, you get hired back. We sort of step onto like what I call a career escalator, right? And then
Yep.
upward you
Yep.
go.
Yep.
So if something happens, something throws a curveball in that, and all of a sudden you feel like you're going backwards down the escalator, can be really disorienting, right? So it's more than just a disappointment.
And they can be unique, right? These
Mm-hmm.
setbacks for new lawyers and articling students, because I think, as you said earlier, they may never have had experienced a setback before.
Yeah,
So it's new and probably a
totally.
little alarming,
Yeah,
right? Probably alarming.
yeah, exactly. And I think especially maybe not especially, but particularly so in a law school context where you're in a setting with your peers too, and so I'm thinking, right now, yeah, I believe it's this week that in-firm interviews are happening for
Hmm.
the formal summer recruit. And what I saw from my time working in law schools is, yeah, not everyone gets a job through
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
process. And when you kind of go to law school thinking, oh, I'm going to work in one of the big firms. I'm going to like go through this process. I've got good grades to this point. I've been successful in the things that I've done. And, I mean, the job search process can be really random in a lot
Yes.
of ways. And if you're not successful in that, I've seen some students be, yeah, really disoriented, really, it's been really devastating, right?
Well, and I think there's a lack of control. I think you can study hard. There's a degree of
Mm-hmm.
control with law school, right? I can meet my
Yeah,
deadlines. I can study hard. I can pursue those good grades. I can have my extracurricular activities. But getting those positions, there's a huge level of no control.
totally.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't always make sense. And there's only so many
No.
positions, and not everyone's going to get a position. And that can be so devastating. Um,
Yeah.
I know you have a framework, and one of the things that I was really excited about is you have a framework that you suggest, a 4 steps framework
Mm-hmm.
for recovering from setbacks. And I think I would hope that every law student and a lawyer for that matter, or other professionals listen to this podcast so that they know there's a framework, they can follow
Mm-hmm.
your framework, and it gives them confidence to know that they will be resilient when and if they have a setback, right? So should we start with the first step?
Sure. Yeah. The first stage is about processing the loss. Okay. And I think, part of processing the loss is even recognizing that a loss has occurred.
Mm,
Right. And I think this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier in terms of, law students and high performers having a hard time reaching out for help, right? Because they're not
Mm-hmm.
even acknowledging the loss that's occurred here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, like we're talking about, sort of we build these ideas about the way our life is supposed to go. We have these assumptions about who we are in the world and what our career is going to look like. And so a setback, it might totally change that trajectory for us. And so there's a loss of that assumptive world that we held, right? And that's significant, right? And I think a lot of people um, invalidate their emotional reaction to that.
Interesting. So in processing the loss, they've got to acknowledge there was a loss. They have to kind of accept that there was a loss, that something
Yeah,
occurred
yeah,
and it
exactly.
didn't meet their expectations, and to
Yeah.
acknowledge that there's some internal upset occurring because of that loss, right? So they need to really own it and accept it and process it. Okay, so that's the first step. And that sounds
Mm-hmm.
like without the first step, it's hard to go for it. So that first step is really
Right,
critical.
exactly. It like you say, like acknowledging, really, like
Yes,
noticing your thoughts and
yes,
naming your thoughts for what they are, right? Like
yes.
a lot of times they're just thoughts, right?
And could that
But
come from,
they're going to be there.
oh, sorry, could that come
Go
from
ahead.
somebody external? Could it come from a family member to help you accept like that? When you hear somebody say to you, wow, that really must have been super disappointing. And I see that you're really upset and I see that you're
Mm-hmm.
not back to your old self again. And or
Mm-hmm.
what there may be some messages externally that will help you acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
that you're going through a loss. So if you're not doing it
Yeah.
internally, maybe you accept the external cues. Would that be true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, um, yes, that can be really
Okay.
helpful if you're getting that from your
Yes.
social
Yes.
support,
Yes.
right? And yeah, because sometimes, yeah, and I find especially with high performing people, they can be pretty harsh on themselves, right? And so sometimes we need to hear the message from someone else to
Yes.
really
Yes.
for it to sink in. And so, what I'm going to say, it's seeking social support is not a separate stage of the framework because it's a thread that brings all of the stages together, and
Okay.
it's weaved throughout. So yeah, again, yeah, it's finding that social support throughout the whole process is so valuable.
Yes. Okay. So that's the first step is processing the loss. So once we process
Mm-hmm.
the loss, we acknowledge we're grieving, we're having a difficult time. What is the next
Mm-hmm.
step?
Yeah, so the next step is about getting unstuck, right? Because a lot of the time, yeah, we start ruminating, right?
Yes. Yes.
And we ruminate, for a variety of reasons. But I find lawyers especially are pretty good ruminators, right? We're trained to be analytical, and so yeah, we want to problem solve. We want to think things through. We want to like get to the bottom of things, right? But like you said, a lot of the time, a setback is it's happened. What's happened is outside of our control, and we get stuck on ruminating about things that we really can't do anything
So
about.
overthinking. So you're overthinking, you're
Overthinking.
inside your own. I have clients that do that on all kinds of other things, overthinking. And I know I say to them all the time, not related to this, Jane, but other things. Are you overthinking? Are you pretty
Hmm.
certain we need to take this next step? Let's move forward and take the next step. So I think
Exactly.
just even reminding someone you might be overthinking could be helpful.
Totally. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so again, yeah, getting help from someone like you to point out the overthinking and pointing it out to yourself, noticing when it's happening. That's actually a really helpful way to separate yourself from your thoughts a little bit,
Oh,
right?
right.
So even just
Oh,
just saying to yourself, "Oh, I'm overthinking right now."
right.
It helps you kind of take control over your thoughts rather than your thoughts taking control of you. Right. And then other helpful ways to get unstuck is to just take some perspective here, right? If you had a colleague that was going through the same thing or a classmate or something, what advice would you give to them? What would you tell them? Right. And think about, okay, yeah, how do I want to look back on this 5 years from now? Right. So temporal perspective and like sort of, yeah, perspective from someone else's perspective is really helpful. And that's where, again, like the self-compassion piece really comes in here as well.
And maybe going back to the earlier comment you made, if they have had an earlier setback in their life, something unrelated to what's
Mm-hmm.
happening now, they could draw on that as well and bring that forward. How did I how did I manage that? And I, I think it's important to reflect and go, I recovered from that. I'm okay. I am moving forward. And that whole well-known phrase, this too shall pass, even though it's again sounds like another greeting card, it's so true though. This will
But it
pass.
is.
It
It's
sucks
it
right
is.
now. Totally okay to say this really sucks right now. And
Yes.
but I'll get through it and I have tools and resources. So getting unstuck is the second
Exactly.
step, right?
Right. And what you've just said is such a great segue into the third step, which is about learning and growing. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's where, again, yeah, we use that self-compassion piece to be an effective coach to yourself, right? And an effective coach is compassionate, right? They're not going to be harsh on you and be like, you did all this wrong and all this. It's about, okay, reflecting on what you did do well in the situation. You know, sometimes when you experience a setback, it's because you put yourself out there in some way. You took a risk, right? And there's a lot to be celebrated in that, right? And then of course, yeah, thinking about, yeah, what could I have done better here, right? And
Right.
then what have I learned about myself, about the law, about careers? You know, there's so many learnings you can take from an experience. And like you say, part of that is learning that, yeah, it's temporary
Yes,
too,
yes,
right?
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And you talked, Jane, earlier about the social aspect of the recovery and the framework. So talking to people, being vulnerable with somebody you trust who is going to be that
Mhm.
compassionate person. Do you also recommend different forms of self-expression, journaling, or some way of
Mhm.
actually working through your thoughts and feelings?
Totally.
Because some
Yeah.
people might feel more comfortable doing that too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I definitely want to honor that everyone's got a different way of working through these things.
Mhm.
And certainly, like, yeah, journaling can be really helpful at all stages here,
Right.
right? So certainly in the processing stage, sometimes you just gotta like
Yeah.
just write
Yep.
everything out, right?
Yep.
Just get the words from here to the paper.
Yep.
And then, you know, at this stage of the learn and grow, yeah, it can be really helpful to have very specific journaling about, okay, what did I do well? You know, what would I do differently next time? What am I learning from this situation? And then, you know, I would add to that too, you know, on the topic of sort of, okay, learning that this is not temporary, right? What a really important concept here is the idea of optimism, right? And that optimism is something we can learn, and we do so by reframing those ideas that those stories we tell ourselves after a setback, right?
Yes.
That like, yeah,
Yes.
this is going to last forever, and it means
Yes.
I'm a failure in all areas of my life. And, you know, like these kinds, if we can reframe those things, we can be more optimistic. And the research shows that helps us recover more quickly from setbacks.
I don't know if I'm jumping to the next step, but it seems to me that we have this tape that runs in our head, and the tape might be,
Mhm.
I didn't deserve that summer position, or
Mhm.
imposter syndrome shows up. I shouldn't be in law school. What was I thinking? And,
Yeah.
you know, whatever are all those negative messages that many of us have in our head, even as senior experienced people, by the way, this is not reserved for juniors or new
Mhm.
professionals in any way, shape, or form. So to acknowledge the tape that's running in your head and to replace the tape with
Mhm.
something that celebrates and is compassionate and celebrates what you tried, and you put yourself out there and
Yeah.
look at the courage that I showed. I put myself
Mhm.
on the field. I was uncertain and there's no possible way I could have been 100% prepared, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
And look at the learn, like we're changing the tape, you know?
Yeah,
And it
exactly.
might sound silly and it might sound, you know, too prescribed, but I know for myself that's been really helpful. And it's even if it's trickery on
Mhm.
the brain, by changing the tape and what we tell ourselves becomes true and really meaningful.
Exactly. And I think, yeah, you summed it up really well. This is what it's all about, is recognizing the story that we're telling ourselves about it, and then rewriting that story into something that's more helpful for
Hmm.
us,
Yes,
right?
100%.
And
100%.
that does lead into, yeah, the fourth stage, which is about moving forward and rewriting your next chapter.
So what would be some of the tools in there? So now, okay, so you've processed the loss,
Mhm.
you're now getting unstuck, which is really important. You're stopping to kind of learn and grow. So you're kind of almost sinking into this state that you're in. You're writing, you're talking to friends, you're thinking about it, you're hopefully being compassionate with yourself and acknowledging the risk or the, putting yourself out there and you didn't get the result that you wanted. Now you're ready to pivot to that next chapter. How do you know are we ever finished learning and growing? Is there an overlap?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I know I'm certainly not done with
I know.
it.
So that next
Yeah,
step then, that write the next chapter, I guess it's intuitive when we're ready to write that next chapter and enter into that fourth phase.
exactly. And that's why, like I said, these stages can be a bit arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
And so, some things might be happening simultaneously,
Okay.
or it happens organically. But basically, it's about taking what you've learned, and taking that growth and turning it into action, right? And turning it into action that's within your control and is aligned with your values and who you want to be in the world, right? So, a phrase that I find helpful when I think about this is, okay, usually a setback changes your sense of reality a bit, right? It changes your career trajectory or other assumptions you might have held. So given this new reality now, what do you want your life to stand for?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, and I find, really doing a deep dive into exploring your values can be so grounding here because, I kind of think about, we talked about how disorienting it can be to experience a setback, right? And you're just kind of lost, right? There's no path, there's no navigation, right? But your values kind of give you that compass. So
Right.
at least you can know kind of what direction you want to go in
Do you have an
here.
example for that, Jayne? Is there something that you could
Yeah,
share?
yeah, totally. So I mean, I'm thinking the first example that I love that it comes to mind is from the sport world because I was working with an athlete just recently. This came up for me, and I just love this so much because this athlete, she sustained an injury in her season, and of course was heartbroken that she couldn't do that race season. But then ended up like, she was like, okay, what are my values here? Right. And one of them was curiosity and just like learning about different things. And so she ended up taking up a different discipline in her sport. And now that's her main one. Right. And it was like led to this whole like, new opportunity for her that she didn't even see before. Or, and, something more law related. I have another client who unfortunately was laid off from his position. But realized, okay, why am I even in law in the first place? It's because I
Mm,
want to help others, right? I
right.
really enjoy helping others. And yeah, he wasn't able to get a job right away, but he started doing some volunteer work just to
Right.
live out that value.
Right.
Um, and that, led to opportunities in the nonprofit world that was actually a lot more aligned with the type of work he wanted to do anyways.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's interesting, when I think about setbacks in my, like even just in preparing for this interview, I was kind of thinking about, okay, what setbacks have I had in my own life? And when I look back on them, like in hindsight, I'm like, they don't seem like setbacks, right? They were at the time, it was devastating. But when I look back now, I'm like, wow, if I hadn't have had that setback, I wouldn't be where I am today, right? I
And
wouldn't have had all the things that have come together.
yes, and that just comes with life experience and wisdom and having
Yeah,
having experienced that journey to get to where you are now.
totally.
You look back and you go,
Yeah.
well, if not for that, then I would have made these decisions and I wouldn't be where I am now. And now and that's part of the journey of your career. It's not, everything builds on the next experience, whether they're good
Totally.
experiences or bad experiences. And
Yeah.
and I know I've said to others, when you have a challenging workplace and you're going through that experience, there's a reason why you're there. And perhaps one of the reasons is that if ever you have an opportunity to influence a workplace, it's going to look different and perhaps more accommodating, um, more productive for your colleagues than what you've experienced, right? So sometimes those
Yeah.
lessons are what helps us move forward and create different experiences for others.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
Right. Like,
yeah,
yeah, we can really, again, use our values to be a model for other people.
yes,
Right.
yes.
And to show like, yeah, the potential that can happen. So yeah, I mean, with all of this stuff, so of course, recovering from setbacks is really resiliency is what we're talking about, and fostering resiliency. And and so with that too, I want to sort of bring in the idea of like flexibility and adaptability, because resiliency is about bouncing back. That's sort of like the basic definition of it. So you think about a ball, you drop it, it bounces back up. Sometimes it bounces right
Sometimes
back into your
higher.
hand,
Yeah.
and sometimes it goes higher, or sometimes
Yeah.
it goes in a totally different direction,
Yeah.
right? That we didn't anticipate at all.
Yeah.
And so a big part of the recovery process is being flexible to different options. And so I think, everyone's going to have their own values that they bring into this process, but having a sense of open-mindedness about, yeah, where that could take you next is so helpful.
Well, I loved your earlier comment about curiosity. So I love
Mm-hmm.
resilience, being flexible, maybe bringing in curiosity to see what's next and where's that ball going, and should you pursue
Yeah.
and take a look at something that maybe didn't wasn't in your universe and in your perspective until then. So that
Yeah.
can be interesting. So how do you then, so we've gone through the four steps. I know they overlap and they can come at different stages. So process the loss, get unstuck, learn and grow, write the next chapter. And as you're writing the next chapter, where does confidence, I know you're talking about resilience, and maybe there's similar resilience and confidence. How do you then start to rebuild your confidence so that you're
Oh,
ready to take
yeah.
that next step?
Yeah, totally.
Hard.
Um, it's tough because setbacks can really have a big impact on your confidence,
Yes.
right? For sure.
Yeah.
Like I definitely I've seen law students who, if we go back to the same example of not getting a job through OCIs, yeah, it really affects the confidence in, oh, whether I can get a job at all now, and I don't know how to find a job that's not through the formal process, if that's like a new skill that they need to build, you know um or like, say a new associate makes a drafting error, they might then think, oh, I made this one error, and so I'm just like, I can't do anything law related now, right? You
Yes.
might kind of generalize that.
Yes.
So you can definitely have a big impact. And so I think, yeah, and part of the moving forward process is understanding how confidence and resiliency work together. And so confidence is kind of about like your belief or your trust in yourself to be able to do a specific task or meet a specific goal. Whereas, yeah, resilience, like we mentioned, is more about sort of like, being able to bounce back and thrive following setbacks.
Right.
But the thing is that these two concepts kind of build upon each other. So when you can rebuild your confidence, you put yourself in a position where you're more willing to take more risks, which then gives you more opportunity to build resiliency, because the more risks you take, the more you realize you can get through tough things. You can quote fail and still be okay, right? And so by taking more risks, getting through setbacks, you build resiliency overall, which helps you be more confident in the things that you do.
So in building confidence, then would you go back and do a lot of things that you know you're good at a lot and re-stabilize yourself by putting yourself, and maybe it's volunteer work. I love that example too. Doing
Mm-hmm.
something that you know you're good at and that others acknowledge that you're good at,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
and to hear your social network tell you, believe them when they tell you you're good at certain things and to lean into
Mm-hmm.
that, right? I think that could
Mm-hmm.
help rebuild
Absolutely.
confidence. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think, um, yeah, it's supporting yourself and surrounding yourself with people who support you
Yeah.
as well
Yeah.
is so important. And yeah, like you say, kind of going back to the basics a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when our confidence has been shattered by a setback, it can feel really overwhelming to just like jump into something again. And when we feel overwhelmed, the best way to deal with that is just like bite-sized steps to get back into it.
Right, because I guess there's a lot of fear. Oh my gosh, I got stung doing
Yes.
that. That felt awful. That set me back by, a period of time, whatever that is it's different for different people. For some people, it
Yeah,
can be a long period of time. And climbing and
exactly.
scratching your way back up is long and painful and difficult. And of course, the one piece, we have to mention is to ask for help, ask for counseling help, look for those resources. And I suppose it's different for everyone. Somebody might be stuck for a week and be fed up and, be looking, but it could take somebody longer to recognize that they
Hmm.
actually need the help and they are worthy of the help, right, Jayne? Like,
Yeah.
I think everyone, well, I know everyone's worthy of the help, and there are
Mm.
resources through you, but there's also resources through lawyer assistance program.
Yeah.
There's resources through. There was a third one that we had noted through certainly benefits packages if you're an articling
Yeah.
student or summer
Yeah,
student.
and
There's benefit.
I think lawyers have access to telehealth now.
Telehealth, that was the other
Yeah.
one, right? And maybe
Yeah.
through the law school too,
Yeah, absolutely.
as
Like
well, right?
a lot of law schools have embedded counselors
Yes.
in their programs now. So that, I mean, that's one thing that's great about being in the legal profession is there are a lot of law specific supports available for people.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
but that's such a good reminder that, yeah, sometimes you gotta tell yourself or remind yourself, yes, I'm worthy
I'm
of
worthy
getting
of the
help.
help.
And it's not a sign of weakness, right? It's actually a professional strength to be able to reach out.
Well, I know so many lawyers who, other than having family and friends and close people, loved ones in their circle, but reaching out, it's becoming, I think you said it earlier, Jayne, it's becoming more common. And
Mm-hmm.
I just
Mm-hmm.
think it's fantastic because I think the
Mm-hmm.
the road to recovery is probably a little bit shorter. And you probably have an opportunity to recognize your resilience when you come out of that phase in your career journey, to look back. I think there's a lot of value to look back and go, I took that risk. Maybe I would have done things differently, but I'm now okay. And if I have another setback, and again, this comes with wisdom and experience. If I have another
Mm-hmm.
setback, I know I'm going to be okay. I
Yeah.
do want to mention, and I say this, I've said this publicly before. It's so important that if you're around somebody who's had a setback, to not hesitate to reach out to them.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who have been terminated or have had significant setbacks and they haven't had the support that they had hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people, if you know somebody who's lost their job, go reach out. They can choose
Yeah,
whether they engage or not, but always reach
exactly.
out so they have that support network.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's such a good point, Susan, because I think, a lot of the time when someone experiences a setback, we don't know what to say to them. We worry about saying the wrong thing and so we avoid, right? When, yeah, those people really, yeah, they need support, right?
Mm,
And so it's so human to just, yeah, reach out to say, hey, I'm here if you want it. You don't have to
yes,
respond, but I'm
yes,
here if
yes.
you need it.
I've
Yeah.
done that many times. I'm thinking of you.
Mhm.
I hope you're
Yeah,
okay. No need to
exactly.
reply. Just want to
Yeah.
connect. Just send out a message. And if you want to go for a walk, if you want to hop on a call, and a lot of people have taken me up on it. And we hop on a Zoom
Mm.
and we either get into things or not. It's up to them where they. And I'm not a
Yeah.
counselor, but I am. I hope to always show up as a really supportive colleague of
Yeah.
anyone who needs that. So I think that's really
Yeah.
important, just to feel like you're not
Ex
alone.
exactly. I think that's the biggest part.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it can be a very lonely experience,
Yes.
right? So to know someone is there is, oh, such a big part of the healing process.
Yes. Yes. Students have every opportunity to recover and to get back on their feet, reach out for the resources that they need and the help that they
Mhm.
need so that they can get back on track as quickly as what feels comfortable for them. And I think knowing that probably every successful person would say that they've had a setback of some form or another. I think that's probably true.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see you nodding very quickly at
Absolutely.
that.
Yes. And I think, in a way, yeah, you just mentioned those lawyers on LinkedIn sharing their stories. I mean, I would never say that someone has to share their story or anything like that.
No.
But I think it's so helpful to be that role model, right?
Mhm.
For people who are more senior in the legal profession to show those vulnerabilities. And, that's mentorship,
Yes.
really,
Yes. 100%.
yeah, like I have a client who, is a partner at the firm she works at. And was always worried about, mentoring younger associates or whatever, and worrying about, if I make a mistake or something. I'm like, no, I embrace that. Right? If they
Yeah.
can see that you're human, that is like the most helpful mentorship you can provide.
Yes. Yes. 100%. And hopefully everyone's in a firm where when and if you do make a mistake, you are supported and you aren't
Mm-hmm.
shamed. And it's a learning opportunity and a growth opportunity. And I think that should be true for anyone. And even I remember I was in a firm and there was a very senior lawyer who was, I'm going to say, a year from retirement, who was on a call with an institutional client, a big client that anyone would be so happy to have. And they were
Mm-hmm.
unpacking an issue. And this senior lawyer said to his client, "Oh my God, did I make a mistake in my advice to you?" He completely outed himself on this
Mm.
call of very senior people, a very important institutional client that had been a client of his and their firms for a decade or more. And he just outed himself. "Oh my God, did I make a mistake?" And the client fortunately quickly said, "No, no, no, it wasn't you. It was something else." And he was quickly reassured that truly it wasn't him. And he told me the story later. And I thought, that's so interesting that you're sharing that with me and that you outed yourself in front of a client, which would require a lot of courage
Exactly.
in my experience
Yeah.
with the clients that I work with. And I thought that was really interesting. Yes, he was a year or two from retirement, but I think he would have rolled that way anyway, earlier in his career. And I think that's what endears him to his clients too, right? To be
Mm-hmm.
human and to be open and vulnerable.
Yeah.
So Jayne, people can contact you for your help in working with the lawyer mindset. I know you have some really fabulous services that are specific to athletes, specific to lawyers. I know you
Mm-hmm.
counsel in all different other areas of counseling. So you're kind of just a great person to talk to and to reach out to if somebody is struggling with a setback or anything else, right? Maybe there's elite
Absolutely.
sport athletes in our midst here who need
Well,
support.
there's a lot of overlap between sport and law for
Yes, there
sure.
is.
Like, I mean, just in terms of, the high performing mindset, but also, a lot of people in law are athletes too. So, yeah.
So they can come and reach you how? Through the Lawyer Mindset website. They should go and have a look actually and have a look
Yeah,
at all the
totally. And
services.
there's a bunch of free resources on the Lawyer Mindset website too that can be like Bina's created some awesome courses. There's also like a free, we've been talking about values a lot here
Yes.
today, and there's a free values exploration guide there. So I'd encourage anyone to go check that out for sure. But yeah, you can find me through the website there. You can email me at JAYNE at thelawyermindset.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Lots of different ways. And we'll put all those points in the show notes below so that people can find them if they're looking on YouTube. And you referenced Bina, and that's Bina Stock, who has
Yeah.
been on this podcast as well. And she's the founder of the Lawyer Mindset, and you get to work with her. Aren't you lucky?
Oh, I'm
Aren't you lucky?
so grateful to be able to work with her. She's wonderful to work with, such a good mentor for me.
Well, you're both a wealth of resources, and I know anybody'd be lucky to work with you. And I would say, it's important that people find who they work best with. So, try
Mhm.
different counselors and go out and just make sure you get the help that you need. Jayne, this has been
Absolutely.
really interesting, and there's been so much value in the four-step framework. Thank you for that, and all the other tools that you
Mhm.
shared. And I encourage people to reach out and connect with you, even if they don't have something urgent, but it'd be good for them to connect with you anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Susan.
Yeah.
This is a topic I could talk about forever. So I feel like we touched on a few of the important pieces, but absolutely. Like if anyone wants to reach out, I'd love to continue the conversation. And thank you, Susan, so much for having me on the show.
Wonderful. My pleasure, Jayne. Thanks again. Take care.
Okay, thanks.
Stay tuned for our Lawyer Launcher debrief. Well, I really enjoyed that conversation with Jayne. She's clearly good at what she does, and being a high performer herself, she really knows what it feels like to have a setback and to be in a place where she has to rebuild her own confidence. So she knows of what she speaks. She's done it herself. She's sought counseling herself as an elite athlete, as she told us. So I think she is very well equipped to help law students and lawyers and senior people and everybody in between to help whatever it is that you need to move forward in your career. Some of the takeaways that I had from this interesting chat was there's a good chance you're going to have a setback in your career at some point. To look at the four-step framework for a career setback. It was process the loss, get unstuck, learn and grow, and write the next chapter. And at any stage and any point of that, to reach out and get help. You've got the lawyer mindset as a website with lots of resources to consider. You've got Jayne herself to reach out to and get some help through Jayne. You've got TELUS Health, which I think is a free resource. The Lawyers Assistance Program is another free resource. And likely there is counseling at your law school. That's another free resource. And just know that you're worthy of the support that you need. Don't let a setback get you stuck for any longer than necessary. Work through your process and reach out for help and stay connected to your social networks. So with that, I wish you a courageous career. Go forward and take some educated risks, take some chances, and keep moving forward. Thanks for joining me.